Master and Man by Leo Tolstoy. Chapter 8. Meanwhile, Vasily Andreevich, with his feet and the ends of the reins, urged the horse on in the direction in which for some reason he expected the forest and forester's hut to be. The snow covered his eyes, and the wind seemed intent on stopping him. But bending forward and constantly lapping his coat over and pushing it between himself and the cold-harnessed pad, which prevented him from sitting properly, he kept urging the horse on. Muhorty ambled on obediently, though with difficulty, in the direction in which he was driven. Vasily Andreevich rode for about 5 minutes straight ahead, as he thought, seeing nothing but the horse's head and the white waist, and hearing only the whistle of the wind about the horse's ears and his coat collar. Suddenly, a dark patch showed up in front of him. His heart beat with joy, and he rode towards the object, already seeing in his imagination the walls of village houses. But the dark patch was not stationary. It kept moving, and it was not a village, but some tall stalks of wormwood sticking up through the snow in the boundary between two fields, and desperately tossing about under the pressure of the wind, which beat it all to one side and whistled through it. The sight of that wormwood, tormented by the pitiless wind, made Vasily Andreevich shudder. He knew not why, and he hurriedly began urging the horse on, not noticing that when riding up to the wormwood, he had quite changed his direction, and was now heading the opposite way, though still imagining that he was riding towards where the hut should be. But the horse kept making towards the right, and Vasily Andreevich kept guiding it to the left. Again, something dark appeared in front of him. Again he rejoiced, convinced that now it was certainly a village. But once more it was the same boundary, overgrown with wormwood. Once more the same wormwood desperately tossed by the wind and carrying unreasoning terror to his heart. But its being the same wormwood was not all, for beside it there was a horse's track partly snowed over. Vasily Andreevich stopped, stooped down, and looked carefully. It was a horse track only partially covered with snow, and could be none but his own horse's hoof prints. He had evidently gone round in a small circle. "I shall perish like that," he thought, and not to give way to his terror, he urged on the horse still more, peering into the snowy darkness, in which he saw only flitting and fitful points of light. Once he thought he heard the barking of dogs or the howling of wolves, but the sounds were so faint and indistinct that he did not know whether he heard them or merely imagined them, and he stopped and began to listen intently. Suddenly, some terrible deafening cry resounded near his ears, and everything shivered and shook under him. He seized Muhorty's neck, but that too was shaking all over, and the terrible cry grew still more frightful. For some seconds Vasily Andreevich could not collect himself or understand what was happening. It was only that Muhorty, whether to encourage himself or to call for help, had neighed loudly and resonantly. "Ugh, you wretch! How you frightened me, damn you!" thought Vasily Andreevich. But even when he understood the cause of his terror, he could not shake it off. "I must calm myself and think things over," he said to himself. But yet he could not stop, and continued to urge the horse on, without noticing that he was now going with the wind instead of against it. His body, especially between his legs where it touched the pad of the harness and was not covered by his overcoats, was getting painfully cold, especially when the horse walked slowly. His legs and arms trembled, and his breathing came fast. He saw himself perishing amid this dreadful snowy waste, and could see no means of escape. Suddenly, the horse under him tumbled into something, and sinking into a snowdrift, began to plunge and fell on his side. Vasily Andreevich jumped off, and in so doing dragged to one side the breechband, on which his foot was resting, and twisted round the pad to which he held as he dismounted. As soon as he had jumped off, the horse struggled to his feet, plunged forward, gave one leap and another, neighed again, and dragging the drugget and the breechband after him, disappeared, leaving Vasily Andreevich alone on the snowdrift. The latter pressed on after the horse, but the snow lay so deep and his coats were so heavy that, sinking above his knees at each step, he stopped breathless after taking not more than 20 steps.
The copse, the oxen, the leasehold, the shop, the tavern, the house with the iron-roofed barn, and my heir, thought he. How can I leave all that? What does this mean? It cannot be.
These thoughts flashed through his mind. Then he thought of the wormwood, tossed by the wind, which he had twice ridden past, and he was seized with such terror that he did not believe in the reality of what was happening to him.
Can this be a dream?
He thought, and tried to wake up, but could not. It was real snow that lashed his face and covered him and chilled his right hand from which he had lost the glove. And this was a real desert in which he was now left alone like that wormwood, awaiting an inevitable, speedy, and meaningless death.
Queen of Heaven, Holy Father Nicholas, teacher of temperance,
he thought, recalling the service of the day before, and the holy icon with its black-faced and gilt frame, and the tapers which he sold to be set before that icon, and which were almost immediately brought back to him, scarcely burnt at all, and which he put away in the store-chest. He began to pray to that same Nicholas the wonder-worker to save him, promising him a thanksgiving service and some candles. But he clearly and undubitably realized that the icon, its frames, the candles, the priest, and the thanksgiving service, though very important and necessary in church, could do nothing for him here, and that there was and could be no connection between those candles and services and his present disastrous plight.
I must not despair, he thought. I must follow the horse's track before it's snowed under. He will lead me out, or I may even catch him. Only I must not hurry, or I shall stick fast and be more lost than ever.
But in spite of his resolution to go quietly, he rushed forward and even ran, continually falling, getting up, and falling again. The horse's track was already hardly visible in places where the snow did not lie deep.
I am lost, Vasily Andreevich thought. I shall lose the track and not catch the horse.
But at that moment he saw something black. It was Muhorti, and not only Muhorti, but the sledge, with the shafts and the kerchief. Muhorti, with the sacking and the breechband twisted round to one side, was standing not in his former place but near the shafts, shaking his head, which the reins he was stepping on drew downwards. It turned out that Vasily Andreevich had sunk in the same ravine Nikita had previously fallen into, and that Muhorti had been bringing him back to the sledge, and he had got off his back no more than 50 paces from where the sledge was. End of chapter 8.